Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep. Welcome to our daily Hindu analysis. Before we begin, don't forget to join our Telegram channel for regular updates on current affairs. You can join by using the link provided in the description below, or you can even scan the QR code that has been provided over here. So let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at an article from the front page of the Delhi edition. According to the article, Chinese telecom company Huawei is looking to dial down its R&D operations in India after facing action from the government. So in this context, we need to understand the controversy surrounding Huawei, as the topic can be very important for international relations and as well as for internal security. See, Huawei is a major Chinese telecom company that dominates the global telecom and internet market. Across the world, most of the 2G, 3G and 4G telecom networks are heavily dependent on Huawei's equipment, as it serves as the backbone of the global telecom and internet infrastructure. This Chinese company designs and develops critical telecom switching equipment, and the mobile and internet infrastructure of several countries is heavily dependent on it. This company also produces consumer electronic devices and mobile phones, but it primarily dominates the mobile and internet infrastructure segment and almost has a global monopoly in the market. It is this dominant position enjoyed by the company which makes it a significant player in the telecom industry. And even in the Western markets, including the United States and Western Europe, much of their 2G, 3G and 4G infrastructure is dependent on Chinese companies like Huawei. This dominant position of the Chinese company has led to concerns in Western countries, as their intelligence agencies believe that Huawei has very close links with the Chinese Communist Party and allegedly has been forced to work on behalf of Chinese intelligence to install security backdoors in its telecom switching equipment, which can enable Chinese intelligence agencies to hack into Western networks through these security backdoors, as a part of its cyber espionage and cyber warfare operations targeted against Western governments. These allegations have led Western governments to brand Huawei as a cybersecurity threat. And in fact, several countries, including US, UK and others, have already banned Huawei from participating in their 5G networks. So this controversy surrounding Huawei is an extension of the Cold War rivalry going on between US and China, and could also be seen as an outcome of the tech war and geopolitics that these two countries are involved in against each other with regard to critical and emerging technologies. While there seems to be a valid reason for such security concerns against Chinese companies, one cannot ignore the possibility that Western countries, especially US, might also be trying to use the national security grounds as an excuse to retain their predominant position in emerging technologies such as 5G networks, and could be trying to cut off Chinese companies from competition by waging a tech war against Chinese companies as a part of its geopolitical agenda. But nevertheless, the security concerns surrounding Chinese companies like Huawei cannot be ignored, and there seems to be a valid basis for these concerns, considering how close Chinese companies are to Chinese security services. These concerns are all the more serious with regard to Huawei, as it has always enjoyed close links with the PLA or the People's Liberation Army, and as well as with the Ministry of State Security, which is responsible for handling Chinese foreign intelligence operations. So this standoff between Western countries and China over Huawei has also dragged India, as India also has similar concerns about this company, and these concerns have gone up over the last 2-3 years, especially after the 2020 Ladakh clashes. Following this recent border standoff, India has stepped up its monitoring of Chinese companies and Chinese corporate influence in India, and the prime focus has been on companies like Huawei, which enjoy a dominant position even in the Indian telecom market. Similar to the Western market, even in India, Huawei has a dominant position in the telecom and internet infrastructure market, and much of India's 2G, 3G and 4G networks are dependent on equipment from Huawei. Upon this, Huawei has made large investments in research and development, and has even set up several large research facilities that employs thousands of people, thus making it a key player in research and innovation in the telecom internet segment. So this has amplified India's security concerns about the company and about its possible involvement in creating security backdoors for Chinese intelligence, which could potentially make India vulnerable for Chinese cyber attacks. Apart from the cybersecurity threat, India has also been deeply concerned about growing Chinese corporate influence in the Indian economy, and of late has taken strict action against Chinese companies and Chinese mobile applications. For example, in 2020, when the Ladakh border clashes happened, India banned several Chinese mobile apps, including TikTok, PUBG, WeChat, etc., on national security grounds, as these companies were not transparent on how they handled Indian data, and it led India to worry about Chinese intelligence agencies possibly misusing Indian data. So India went ahead and banned several of these applications and even placed a lot of restrictions on Chinese investments in India. Since then, India has stepped up its scrutiny of Chinese companies that are already operating in India, especially those that have a dominant position in the market. So as a result, over the last few months, several investigations have been opened against Chinese companies such as Vivo, Oppo, ZTE Telecom, Xiaomi, etc. And these investigations have revealed several accounts of fraud and has led Indian agencies such as the IT Department, the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence and Enforcement Directorate to carry out repeated raids and investigations against these companies. And allegedly, many of these companies, including Huawei, are involved in accounting fraud, where they are underreporting their profits in India in order to evade paying taxes to the government. And reportedly, they are shifting these profits out of India, which not only takes a hit on government's revenue, but also poses the threat of economic destabilization. As a result of all these concerns, India has even kept Huawei out of its ongoing 5G trials, just like the Western countries have kept the company out of their 5G networks. According to reports, the government has even placed an informal or unofficial ban on any research collaboration with Huawei, which has put an end to Huawei's joint projects with Indian universities, Indian research institutions, and Indian companies. So as a result of this enhanced scrutiny from the Indian government and its security agencies, Huawei has decided to scale down its R&D operations in India after denying all these allegations. According to the report, it might downsize its R&D center located outside of Bengaluru, and this could also have a major impact on thousands of employees, as the company is likely to trim down the jobs in India. So this issue highlights the ongoing tech war, which is an extension of global geopolitics, and illustrates how India and China are increasingly growing hostile to each other. Now let's take up an important column from page number 8 that helps us understand the pros and cons of facial recognition technology. See, facial recognition is an AI-based algorithm which creates a digital map of the face of an individual for later identifying the individual based on unique facial features. It uses the digital map of the face of an individual and matches it up against its database and verifies whether the two match or not. This automated tool today serves a number of purposes, and it is being used in two different ways. One, it is used for one-on-one verification or one-is-to-one verification of identity, where the facial map of one individual is matched and compared against the facial map, which is already stored in its existing database. Such one-is-to-one verification of identity is required for providing access to secure areas, even to unlock your smartphones with facial security features. And also increasingly, government agencies are deploying it to identify the targeted beneficiaries of welfare schemes in order to ensure accurate identification of the individuals. The other form of facial recognition is one-is-to-n identification of identity, where the digital map of one individual's face is identified, sorted, and segregated from a large group of face maps. It involves the identification of a facial map from a photograph or a video, which is then matched up against the entire database to specifically identify the person of interest, And it is this type of 1:n verification which is primarily used by police and security agencies to identify culprits and suspects, as this technology helps in scanning entire footages and helps in identifying specific individuals as a part of investigation. And such tools are being increasingly deployed in India as well by police and security agencies. The focus of the article is the Delhi police, which has deployed such facial recognition technology to identify those who are involved in riots, protests, and mobs. And it illustrates the advantages of such facial recognition tools. Apart from this, facial recognition also has numerous civilian applications as well, and is widely used on various social media platforms, mobile apps, etc. It is also widely used for access control to ensure that only authorized personnel have access to sensitive areas, and thus the technology definitely has numerous advantages. Then, with regard to law enforcement and investigation, facial recognition is specifically used to identify the culprits and suspects and also the victims, and also helps in tracking suspects, as 1:n verification has the potential to scan entire CCTV footages and look out for specific facial features in order to track the suspects. It's because of this application that facial recognition is deployed at airports and other sensitive locations as well, and is also widely used by intelligence agencies to carry out surveillance in order to track down suspects and to contain any security threats. But along with these numerous advantages, facial recognition technology has also raised a number of concerns, especially ethical and privacy concerns, and its potential for misuse has also raised human rights concerns. The article in The Hindu specifically evaluates the usage of facial recognition technology by Delhi police following a recent RTI application that was filed by a civil rights group seeking information on the manner in which the Delhi police was using and deploying facial recognition. The RTI response by the Delhi police has shown that they procured and deployed facial recognition for the first time for tracing and identifying missing children, especially those who are kidnapped or lost, following directions by the Delhi High Court in the Sadan Haldar case of 2018. The court directions in this regard to use facial recognition was specifically meant to trace and identify missing children. But subsequently, Delhi police have expanded the usage of facial recognition without any legal or regulatory framework for investigation and law enforcement as well. And this raises very serious concerns about the misuse and abuse of technology. See, over the years, facial recognition has been deployed in India at several levels of the government, including both the central government and the state governments. It's not just the Delhi police which is using facial recognition, but police and security agencies around the country have been deploying facial recognition, along with the civic administration, which has been using facial recognition for delivering government services. So this widespread usage and application of facial recognition without any legal or regulatory framework is what raises these concerns, because there are two persistent issues with facial recognition softwares. One is the question of misidentification. Since facial recognition tools are shown to be inaccurate, there are high chances that they could deliver a number of false positives and false negatives, where they incorrectly identify an individual or fails to identify the actual suspects. There could be cases where the facial profile of a completely innocent person could be matched with a suspect, and based on this false positive, the police could take this as a lead and go on to arrest the individual as well. There could also be instances where the actual suspects are not correctly matched by the facial recognition software, thereby the false negative helps the actual culprits to get away as a result of the inaccuracy of the recognition software. The other major concern is that facial recognition, if widely deployed, could be misused for carrying out mass surveillance that could be a breach of privacy and human rights and could lead to the weakening of democratic structures. Several studies in India and around the world have shown that facial recognition technology can go inaccurate, thereby leading to a number of cases of misidentification. And a bigger concern is that since facial recognition is based on AI algorithm, its functioning is entirely dependent on the data that it is fed with. And since such data already contains a lot of societal bias, it could end up training the algorithm to be biased against minorities and women, and particularly racial minorities, ethnic minorities, and religious minorities could be unfairly targeted by the software. And this bias has been established as well in several studies. For example, in 2018, a study by an American organization showed that Amazon's facial recognition technology was flawed and had incorrectly identified US members of Congress as criminals after matching their facial profile with arrested criminals. In this instance, a majority of them who were misidentified by the software were people of color, thus highlighting the racial bias that has crept into AI technologies. The study further showed that the error rate was higher while identifying women of color, which clearly indicates the bias of AI algorithms against minorities, especially racial, religious, ethnic minorities, and as well as against women. The other concern being pointed out by the writer of the column is that the Delhi police has set a 80% match as the threshold, and any match above 80% is treated as a positive match and leads to the arrest of the individual. But anything below this is treated as a false positive and not as a false negative, and leads the Delhi police to further collect evidence and continue investigation against the individual, which could potentially lead to the targeting of wrong individuals. The problem here is that, first of all, there is no scientific or logical basis for setting 80% match as a threshold to identify positive matches. And the second problem is that if the match rate is below 80%, then the police don't stop pursuing the case. Instead, they treat it as a false positive and they go behind the individual to collect more evidence, which could lead to the further harassment of the individual. It is also a well-established fact that in societies around the world, minorities and various other communities, especially weaker sections, they are historically over-policed and targeted and discriminated by the policing system. And as they will have more records and more data against minority communities, it might end up misleading the algorithm and could lead to the continued targeting of such communities. Upon this, the Delhi police also collect photographs, videos, and other data as per Section 3 and 4 of the Identification of Prisoners Act of 1920. Now, this act has been replaced with a more controversial law, that is the Criminal Procedure Identification Act of 2022. This new law allows the police to collect a wider set of data on convicts and prisoners. And this law has already raised concerns about data protection and data privacy. Upon this, the deployment of facial recognition without a legal or regulatory framework could easily result in a blatant violation of globally accepted privacy norms, which has been upheld in India as well as a fundamental right, when right to privacy was declared as a fundamental right under Article 21 in the landmark K.S. Puttaswamy case by the Supreme Court. So in conclusion, the main concern surrounding facial recognition is the possibility of inaccurate identification and wrongful arrests and the possibility of mass surveillance, and thus very serious ethical, privacy and human rights concerns have come up regarding the usage of facial recognition for law enforcement and investigation. While the technology is definitely an enabler for solving crime and for dealing with security threats, it cannot be done in the absence of a legal or regulatory framework, which is very much essential to prevent its abuse or misuse in order to hold the security agencies and law enforcement agencies accountable. Now let's take a look at another column from page number 8 that evaluates the controversy surrounding Nepal's new citizenship law. Even though the detailed provisions of this law is not relevant for our exams, this development does have implications for the India-Nepal relationship, and hence one needs to be familiar with the controversy surrounding Nepal's new citizenship law. See, it has become necessary for Nepal to bring out a new citizenship law because the country recently transitioned into a democracy from a monarchy. It was only in 2006 that Nepal transitioned from a theological state and a monarchy into a secular democratic republic. Following this, democratic elections were introduced in the country and a multi-party system was also put in place. And finally, after a long drawn-out process of constitution making, the final constitution was adopted on the 20th of September 2015. So as per the constitution, all Nepali citizens born before this date are provided with the country's citizenship through the naturalization route, wherein they can claim citizenship by proving that they have been residing in the country for a set number of years. But their children and those who are born after this date remained stateless because the country needed a new law to determine the manner in which they would be granted citizenship. So, to fulfill this gap, Nepal recently introduced a citizenship bill to amend the citizenship law, and recently Nepal's parliament passed the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2006. But when it came to the president for receiving her assent, Nepal's president Bidya Devi Bhandari refused to provide her assent due to the controversy surrounding the bill and has asked Nepal's parliament to reconsider the bill. So it's in this context that we need to understand the controversy surrounding the law and how does it affect India-Nepal relations. See, the biggest criticism against the law is that its provisions seem to be biased against women and goes against the principles of gender justice. Under the law, a person born to a father or a mother with Nepalese citizenship can get citizenship by descent. So if one of the parents is a citizen, that is enough to gain citizenship through descent. This has been outlined under Clause 2b of Article 11. Then Clause 5 says that a person who is born to a Nepalese mother who has lived in the country and has an unidentified father will also get citizenship by descent. But this provision has been criticized because it seems to be biased against women, as the mother is being forced to reveal that her husband is unidentified, and this could be humiliating and traumatic experience for the woman, that too in a conservative orthodox society. On the other hand, no such restrictions have been placed on a Nepalese father who has a child with an unidentified mother. Under Clause 7 of the article, it is stated that a child born to a Nepalese mother and a father holding a foreign citizenship will be given citizenship only through the naturalized route, and this contradicts Clause 2b, which had offered citizenship through the descent route. It also mandates the mother to prove residency, that is permanent residency in Nepal, to ensure that her child gets citizenship, whereas no such restrictions can be seen on the father. Along with such gender-biased provisions, the law also says that punitive action can be taken against the mother if the father is found later, whereas no such punitive action is contemplated for Nepalese fathers. So clearly the law seems to be rooted in Nepal's orthodoxy and patriarchy, but it does have a connection with the India-Nepal relationship as well. See, generally it is stated that India and Nepal have a roti-beti relationship. This statement comes from the fact that India and Nepal have shared long historical, cultural, civilizational ties, and post-independence, they have cemented this relationship with the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship. Through this treaty, the two countries not only set up open borders in order to promote the free movement of people, but they have also guaranteed national treatment to the citizens of each other's country. So because of the system of open borders and national treatment, it's easier for Indians and Nepalese to travel across the border and settle in the other country. And thousands of Nepalese come to India every year to study, work, and settle. So Nepalese in general are very dependent on India for their livelihood, and hence the reference roti, meaning food, for which Nepalese have a dependency on India because their livelihoods are dependent on India. The term beti in this phrase refers to the daughter, as quite often Madesis from the Terai belt over here along the UP-Bihar border, they marry into families on the Indian side, and cross-border marriages are very prevalent between India and Nepal. This can be seen not just in the Terai belt of UP and Bihar, but can also be seen in Uttarakhand as well. So as a part of this historical cultural relationship, there have been several cross-border marriages where Nepalese men have married Indian women and Indian men have also married Nepalese women. But mostly in these cross-border marriages, it's the Mades people who are involved, or the Madesis, who have often been discriminated and oppressed by the dominant community of Nepal, that is the Pahadis. Even when Nepal's constitution was being drafted between 2008 and 2015, the Madesis felt that they were left out and they weren't given equal representation as the Pahadis have dominated over them. The Pahadis have always felt that Nepalese identity has been weakened because of the cross-border marriages that Madhesis enter into with Indians, and hence they had made it very difficult for Indian spouses to get citizenship of Nepal, and they had to go through a 7-year cooling off period in order to apply for Nepal citizenship through the process of naturalization. But now, through the new law, this cooling off period is being removed so that Indian spouses can easily get Nepali citizenship without having to go through the previous hurdles. But the new law has been designed to be against women and gender rights, which happens to be a reflection of Nepal's orthodoxy and patriarchy. Now let's take a look at this article from page number 12, which examines the state of relations between India and China. According to the article, India's Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, has stated that India-China relations cannot be a one-way street. This reference has been made by India's Foreign Minister following China's repeated violations of the various border pacts and agreements that it has signed with India. Especially during the recent Ladakh clashes, China blatantly violated its commitments under these agreements and has hence broken its trust with India. And ever since, India has been insisting that China should own up to these commitments and follow the terms of these pacts and agreements. And it is in this context that the Foreign Minister has stated that the relationship cannot be a one-way street with China. Because back in the 1990s, India-China signed these important pacts and agreements to provide for peace and stability at the disputed border. Back in 1993, when then Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao paid a historic visit to China, the agreement on peace and tranquility along line of actual control was signed in order to maintain stability at the LAC by helping contain local escalations in order to prevent them from turning into a much larger conflict. Then in 1996, the two countries signed an agreement on CBMs or confidence building measures that places restrictions on both the sides, especially on their armed forces, in order to prevent any miscalculations. For example, as per these agreements, the Indian Army and the PLA are prohibited from opening fire against each other, and even when they conduct any training exercises, they are supposed to face inwards, that is away from the border, in order to avoid sending out any wrong message to the other side, which could potentially lead to a military miscalculation and the escalation into a much bigger conflict. Under the Peace and Tranquility Agreement as well, there are several protocols that have been put in place that provides for talks and negotiations to de-escalate from a military standoff or a conflict in order to contain a small situation from escalating into a bigger conflict. But during the latest Ladakh clashes, China seems to have broken all these agreements and violated its trust with India. And it's in this context that India's foreign minister has called upon China to show mutual respect and to uphold its commitments under these agreements. Now let's take a look at a couple of mains practice questions. The first question: Huawei's role in the global telecom market has become increasingly controversial on security grounds. Examine the issue in detail. The second question: Facial recognition technology offers numerous advantages, but its usage in law enforcement has raised serious ethical and human rights concerns. Elucidate. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the answer writing portal, for which the link has been provided in the description box below. So on this note, let's bring our discussion to an end. And if you like the initiative, do let us know by sharing your comments. Don't forget to hit the like button and do subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.